Hi, welcome everybody, and welcome Lawrence, all the way from China. Okay, yeah, doing okay. All right, okay. The trip is about 3 hours.
Flight time is 4 hours.
Hours, okay. All right, okay. Now settle down lah, huh? Well, properly. Taken your
Sort
dinner.
of like,
Okay,
yeah, I have my dinner
okay.
now in my room, bedroom.
Bedroom. Okay, good. Father, we want to thank you this evening that we can come together once again to study your word as we look at the two twin books of Ezra-Nehemiah. And we learn to how you work and sometimes in very mysterious ways, but still, Lord, and in ways unexpected, in ways that sometimes test our faith in you, and that at the right time you will do what is necessary. You will do what is and will be and for our benefit. So we commit ourselves to you in Jesus' name this evening, and as we study this, then the book of Ezra, and we commit ourselves and ask you, Lord, to be our teacher. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, tonight I'm going to be a tribe, and hopefully I'm not too ambitious in my plan. And I'm trying to try to finish 3 chapters, I think. Okay. All right. Chapters 4, 5, and 6 of Ezra. Okay. Now, first of all, I think I need to do some preliminary background. And this is, first of all, the list of Persian kings, and that and we might be then basically need to know a little bit. Cyrus is the founder of this Persian Empire, and the empire. He's not the first Persian king. He then, but largely he founded basically the empire then in 538 and 539 when he conquered Babylon. After Cyrus, he died and fighting and the Scythians in the east, northeast, and then his son Cambyses and became the successor and took over the throne and reigned for about let's see, about 8 years, I think. Cambyses is not mentioned in our Bible, but he is responsible for conquering Egypt. And when he died, there was a power struggle, and one of his officers, and in the midst of the power struggle, and took over Darius the First and Darius the Great, and 522 BC and to 486 BC. After Darius died, and his son Zizus, and Zizus is the Ahasuerus in the book of Esther. He's the one that tried to invade and tried to conquer. That is the movie that you'll remember watching. If you know the movie 300 against the Spartans, and this is he is the one that is featured as the king in the book of Esther. All right. Then we have Artaxerxes, and is also mentioned, and he's the one who featured quite prominently in the later part of Ezra and Nehemiah. All right. Darius and Artaxerxes, and these are further kings down, and we probably would not deal with them, although some would think that. And Ezra then came then after Nehemiah, when he came basically not in the reign of Artaxerxes the first, but Artaxerxes the second. All right. So that is basically the situation that we have. So just keep this in mind, right? And this is a Persian king. Remember Cyrus? After Cyrus, we skip Cambyses, and then you have Darius, then we have Zizus and Artaxerxes. Okay, these are the 4 names that you need to remember. And in the background also, probably we need to go back a couple of centuries back, and this has to do with the Assyrian kings. The Assyrians were overthrown by Babylonians. The Babylonians overthrew by the Persians, but the Assyrians were the one who conquered northern Israel. Sargon the second is the one who then destroyed Samaria and deported the northern 10 tribes over to Assyria. Okay, and after that, his son Sennacherib took over, and we don't hear that much about him. We probably would not please ignore him for our study here. But and his grandson Esarhaddon is mentioned in Ezra chapter 4, and he basically many years later, and there is no record in the Bible or anywhere else that he brought outsiders into the what we call into Judea, into Palestine. And although you will probably read in Ezra that there was a reference to Esarhaddon. Then also Ashurbanipal, and is also after Esarhaddon, and there's also reference that during his reign that he brought further captives into but there's no actual records that we have both in the Bible and as that he actually but it is simply implied in Book of Ezra that he did. All right, so these are the series of kings. Don't need to remember the dates, and just know that Sargon is the one who destroyed Samaria. His grandson was referred to, and then Ashurbanipal, who was one of probably the last great Assyrian king. Okay, all right. Okay, now let's look at the text a little bit. Okay, then we'll go back and look at the okay. Okay, so here, review back in chapter 4, when the enemies of Judah heard that the exiles were building a temple for the Lord God, they came to Zerubbabel and the heads of the families and said, "Let us have you build, because like you, we seek your God who have been sacrificing him since the time of Esarhaddon, king of Syria, brought us here." So these were not the original people that was brought by Sargon. This refer that since the days of Esarhaddon brought us here. Again, there is no biblical historical record on this. There are also no other extra biblical record that this was happened, but since it is here, there is, unless you can disprove it, you can't disprove from silence. So basically, we have to take it probably at face value here. But Zerubbabel and Joshua, the rest of the families of Israel, said, "You have no part in us in building the temple of our God. We alone will build it for the Lord and the God of Israel, as King Cyrus, king of Persia, commanded us." This seems to be very ungenerous. People come to help you and say, "No, we don't want your help." And there are reasons for that. So then these people got upset, and also the people around them started to discourage the people of Judah and made them afraid of going to build. And they bribed officials against them and frustrate their plans during the entire reign of Cyrus the king down to the reign of Darius. So after Cyrus died, his son Cambyses took over, and down to the reign of Darius, king of Persia. Now, verse 6 has to be what we call a digression, okay? Because when they brought down the reign of Darius, the king of Persia, Xerxes is the son of what we call Darius, and Artaxerxes is the grandson. So this is way after the time of Darius. So unless let me share this comment here. Let's see. Okay, PowerPoint. All right. Okay, you see Cyrus, Cambyses, Darius, Xerxes, Artaxerxes. So Cyrus and let them come back, and then the enemies and stopped them from building all through until the time of Darius the Great, the Persian. So Cambyses is not mentioned at all, and then Xerxes and Artaxerxes is mentioned in verse 6 and 7. Okay. Now then, as I said, Sargon is the one who brought the people and who destroyed Samaria, the northern kingdom. And then Sennacherib and Esarhaddon, the grandson, then Ashurbanipal, the great grandson. Okay. Now, in this section, verse 6 to 24, this is, I would say, what we call a digression. And in this section, there's a reference of 3 letters of accusation. Some say it's 2. I think there are 3 letters. We will come back to the text and see. One was written to Xerxes, and the other 2 to Artaxerxes. These 2 kings reigned after Darius, and then chapters 5 and 6 revert back to his reign. So unless our author is completely muddled in this chronology of the period, we must assume that this section is a digression or excursus, that verse 24 was intended to show that we resume the narrative which is broken off at verse 5, whose wording it explicitly picks up. In favor of this solution is the fact that accusations that we're going to read relates to the walls of Jerusalem, verse 12 to 13, and not the temple, which is the subject of the remainder of Ezra chapter 1 to 6. Okay, so what we are saying is that this section, okay, is a digression. All right. So the main reason for this is that this is to kind of help the reader know that when the enemies of Judah heard that exiles were building a temple, how do they know they are enemies of Judah? Okay. If you read it plainly, that these people came to offer help, and then the leaders refused their help, and seems very ungenerous, and you should use them. So this section of digression is to show the kind of people that these people are. Their offer is not really genuine. They are perpetually the enemies of Judah and Benjamin. So even after the temple was finished building, they continue and to cause trouble. So this is to show that the leaders actually did the right thing. And sometimes, and you have to be wise, you deal with your enemies and when they're outside, not wait until the enemies come inside. And it says that and keep the camel outside the tent. Once you let the camel inside the tent, you're habis, gone. All right. So keep them outside. Don't let them come in, and because they're going to destroy and you. So this is a later opposition under Xerxes and Artaxerxes, and in the NIV, very nice caption on the top. It's not part of the text, and but this is as a vision. The NIV try to help you. At the beginning of the reign of Xerxes, we don't, and probably after Cyrus died, they lodged an accusation against the people of Judah and Jerusalem. And Xerxes, and basically when he took up the throne, there was trouble towards the west, and this was opportunity for the enemies to accuse that the Jews probably have involved in some revolt or some rebellion or help plan. So it is not stated what they accused the people of Jerusalem and Israel and Judah and Jerusalem, but just they lodged an accusation. All right, so we are left to speculate. Then after Xerxes, in the days of Artaxerxes, the king of Persia, and Mishlam, Midradat, and Tabil, and the rest of the associates wrote a letter to Artaxerxes. The word Mishlam here, and something that it is not actually a name, it is basically a kind of a preposition that basically Mithridates in agreement with Tabil and the rest of the associates, and wrote a letter to Artaxerxes. But at NIV, I think ESV also takes, and it's in that sense. And let's see, okay. But certain other versions will say that it is in agreement with Mithridates and Tabil, because we have an evidence of this name. We also have evidence of Tabil and Bishlam. Then there is no one that we know of Bishlam, but the name sounds like and Shalom, then be and in agreement, basically in peace and something like that. So something that it is basically this is not important, all right? Whether it's a real name or whether there are two of them, two what we call head honchos and or three head honchos, that is a problem. Now they wrote a letter to Artaxerxes. The letter was written in Aramaic script and in Aramaic language. This phrase is a little bit curious because actually, and it was said that it was written in Aramaic and translated. Okay, so NIV tried, and one of the theories that it was written in Arabic script and it was written in Arabic language. Okay, uh, the the Hebrew and that we have today is written in Aramaic script. The old Hebrew is written differently. The new Hebrew and what we call and eventually the Hebrew language adopted the writing of and the what we call the Aramaic script. Maybe one day China will adopt and pinyin and so that it will be easier for the rest of the world to read Chinese, and so that will be in Romanized script. That is a kind of idea, and Malay and probably in the past was written what we call in Arabic script and then later in Romanized script, and also the middle language, and not written in Jawi, but written in Romanized and very same as in English. So that is the idea. That is, this photo letter was written in Arabic script, but also written in Aramaic language, not in what we called and in Hebrew. So from verse 8 onwards until until the end of chapter 6, you'll find that the text actually is in Aramaic. All right. The text from verse 8 to chapter 6, verse 18 is in Aramaic. All right. Something that this is, verse 8 is the substance of this letter. But it's very likely that we don't have this letter at all. Rackham, the commanding officer, and Shisham, the secretary, is a different time together. This was this one that we have the letter. Okay. And why he did not have this, that maybe he didn't have the source. He didn't have what we call the copy of that letter that was written, but he know that was an accusation. And but this one, Rehom, the commanding officer does not mean a military officer. It is more like a high-ranking officer in a non-military sense. So the commanding officer in the NIV can seem to be, or also I think in the ESV, the commander, even worse. And when we say the commander, it's almost like it's a military, but it's actually is a higher-ranking and a civilian and officer, some kind of a chancellor, like something like that. And the secretary Shimshai, and the rest of the people of the associates, okay, and officials and judges, administrators of the people from Persia, Uruk, and Babylon, and the Elamites of Shusha, and the other people whom the great and honorable Ashurbanipal deported. Again, there was reference here, not Edahashon, but Ashurbanipal. Again, we have no and any records of Ashurbanipal deporting people into then Samaria, into Judea, into Palestine. But we do know that Ashurbanipal and defeated the Elamites in Susha. So then maybe there was reference by Ashurbanipal. So this might be a group of people that came in later and make a complaint. This is a letter they sent to him, to King Artaxerxes, from your servants in the Trans-Euphrates. The Trans-Euphrates is basically beyond the Euphrates, beyond the river. Persia, Assyria is to the east, Judea is to the west. So if we look at the perspective from then what we call Babylon and Persia, then Judea will be to the west, and beyond and crossing the Euphrates River, the river. Okay, so the Trans-Euphrates will be some kind of a province that probably has been incorporated by the Persian Empire, and so your servants in Trans and Euphrates. The king should know that the people who came up to us from you. Now, this letter was written to King Artaxerxes. The people who came up from to us from you, which migration, which what we call and group he's talking about. Looking at it is probably looking at the people that can talk about Zerubbabel, but no, this is after the war is completed, after the temple is completed. So it probably is not talking about that group of people. Most likely, it is referring to the people that came with Ezra that we will find in chapter 7, and which actually Ezra got permission or what we call the order from Artaxerxes himself to go over to Judea to teach the people the law of the land. And so they are saying, say, right, oh, Ezra has probably been disloyal to you, and he has gone to Jerusalem, and instead of teaching, just informing the law and all that, he is gone, and they are rebuilding that rebellious city. They are restoring the walls and repairing the foundations. Okay, so they are rebelling. All right. Furthermore, the king should know that if this city is built and its walls are restored, no more taxes, no more tribute, no more due to be paid. Eventually, the royal revenues will suffer. This looks like it seems a very loyal. Now, since we're under obligation to the palace, this is a very interesting expression. You might like to know that actually the literal meaning is that because we eat the salt of the palace, okay, and ESV translated literally, and since we eat the salt of the palace, what does that mean? Actually, it simply means that when you eat the salt of the palace, it is basically you have some kind of obligation, you're considered loyal and subjects of the palace. And so since under obligation of the palace, and it's not proper for us to see the king dishonor, we are sending this message to inform the king that the search may be made to the archives of your predecessors, those who came before you, your father, your father, your grandfather, and all that. In the records, you will find that this city is a rebellious city, troublesome to kings and provinces, a place with a long history of sedition. That's why this city was destroyed. That part is true in one sense, and they have what we call, but since Cyrus came and gave them, there are actually no records of any of we call sedition, any of we called, and basically people disloyal to the. But here is basically saying that they are building, and Artaxerxes was facing troubles, and in Egypt he's facing trouble in the west. So this sounds very plausible. That's why this city was informed. This city is built and its walls are restored. You'll be left with nothing in the Trans-Euphrates. Okay, so basically they gave some half truths to King Artaxerxes, and the king sent this reply to Rehum, the commanding officer, Shimshai, the secretary, and the rest of Syria living in Samaria and elsewhere in the Trans-Euphrates. Greetings. The letter that you have sent us have been read. It was probably in Aramaic script, and translated in my presence, and not translated Hebrew, but translated into Persian. The international language, the diplomatic language is Aramaic, but among the Persian, the inner court, among themselves, they still speak Persian. So Farsi, so to speak, and so a pre-Farsi language. And so translated in my presence. So I issued an order, and a search was made, and found that this city has a long history of revolt against kings and the place of rebellion and sedition. So they rebel against Sargon, they rebel against Nebuchadnezzar and all that. Then Jerusalem had powerful kings rule over them in the whole of Trans-Euphrates. Some people think some scholars think Jerusalem had powerful kings referring to David and so on. No, because in the context, he's not talking about David and Solomon. He's talking about the powerful Assyrian and Babylon kings rule over them, even also Cyrus, powerful kings rule over them, and taxes and tribute are duty to pay to them. So basically, the accusation is that if you don't do anything, these people will stop paying taxes. So your predecessors and had these people paying taxes to them, and you don't want to be the one when you lose these taxes and tribute and be ashamed to your ancestors. So this is what they are saying, and this is what Artaxerxes and was kind of jumped the gun, in so to speak. So he says now the issue. Artaxerxes is one who says let's and shoot first and ask question later. That kind of an answer. So he issued the order. This man to stop work so that this city will not be rebuilt. And there is a exception clause until I so order. Okay, so he was not really convinced yet, and that these people are rebellious. He only heard one side, but just to make sure, stop the rebuilding. And so this city will not rebuild until I gave a different order. Be careful not to neglect this matter while this threat grow to the interest of royal, we call interest. Now, his command is to stop work. Make these people to stop the work. But these people, as we read from it later, and in a couple of weeks, we look at Nehemiah, they did more than stop the work, they destroyed the walls. Nehemiah was basically lamented because the walls had been destroyed. So they dismantled, did not only stop, but dismantled everything. Okay. And so here they compare the stop by force. So this is a digression. So if we come back to verse 5, okay, and the letter we call verse 5, they bribe officials and frustrate their plans to the entire reign of Cyrus, the king of Persia, down to the reign of Darius, king of Persia. So now we go to verse 24, and therefore the work on the house of God in Jerusalem came to the standstill until the second year of the reign of Darius, king of Persia. So this is kind of resumptive clause and of sentence going back to verse 5, and because the building was stopped until the second, or call it, until Darius became king, and so the house of God came to a standstill until the second year of King Darius. All right, that is about 15, 16, maybe more years stopping. All right, so the work of the temple was stopped for a period of about 15, 16 years. Okay. Then we jump to chapter 5. All right. Now, chapter 5 introduced Haggai, the prophet, and Zechariah, the prophet. It is good that we have Haggai and the books of Haggai and the books of Zechariah. And in what we call in the book of Haggai, okay, on the first day of the 6th month of King Darius, the second year, the Lord spoke this message to prophet Haggai to Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah, and the high priest Joshua of Jehozadak. We are also then a letter, then a book of Zechariah. In the 8th month, in the second year of Darius, came the word of the Lord to Zechariah, the son of Berechiah, the son of Hedo, prophet. Okay, it'd be good for you to go back and if you have the time to read what Haggai said and what Zechariah said. And Haggai seems to focus more and on the actual task at hand. Get your butts and get off your butts and start rebuilding the temple. Zechariah tends to be more what we call messianic, and you find that he has he prophesied some glorious prophecies concerning Zerubbabel and Joshua and all that, and very messianic hopes. But anyway, in our situation, Haggai and Zechariah prophesied to the Jews of Israel, Jews in Jerusalem, and Jerusalem in the name of the Lord was over them. and tell them to rebuild the temple. So Zerubbabel the son of Shealtiel, Joshua the son of Zozadak, set to work to rebuild the house of God in Jerusalem. The prophets of God were with them, supporting them. Okay, and so God, this phrase is very important, and God was now watching over them, and in that sense, and so God was watching over the prophets or the people. That idea that God is moving in a very rather mysterious way, so to speak. And now this time, and after about 15 years, 16 years of no activity, and the prophet come and start rebuilding, and so the new governor or the new what we call, and probably after some years you don't know the background, and so what is this Jews in Judah? Say Judah is probably a kind of a district or a sub-province and of the Trans-Euphrates. So probably Hillwind or people a kind of a very vigorous activity of rebuilding a temple. So he went down to look and to check. Now, he was not antagonistic. It was what we called, and unlike the enemies, basically as a response official, and he heard what's happening, so he goes down to check with his and secretary, so to speak. And the associates went, and the inspectors went to them, asked, who authorized you to rebuild this temple and to finish it? They also asked, what are the names of those who are constructing this building? But the eye of their God was watching over the elders of the Jews, and they were not stopped. Okay. So until a report could go to Darius and a written reply was received. Now, if he was antagonistic, he would say, now you stop doing what you're doing until I get clarification. He let them continue. And because God's favor was upon them, that's how the writer sees it. And is also these people are more neutral and they are not antagonistic. They just want to make sure that these people are following and are not breaking the law and of the Persian Empire. So they want to know why they are building this temple. So who authorized you to do? Who are the people and are building this construct building? Okay. Then he sent a reply, and this is a report. This is a copy of the letter Tattenai, the governor of the Trans-Euphrates, and Shadda-Bozenai, and his secretary probably, and the officials and also official Trans sent to King Darius. The report they sent was this: to King Darius, peace, cordial greetings. The king should know that we went to the district of Judah to the temple of the great God. Doesn't mean that they are believers, and this is just and they are pagans, polytheists. This is that's what the Jews say is their great God, and these people are building with large stones. Okay, large stones are probably stones that and are what we call dress stones, or stones that are too heavy to be carried and had to be rolled. And so large stones is very heavy stones, and this is not a small building, a house, something like that. These are really, really and big, big, and they are placed timbers in the wall. Now, building a place like a temple, and in those days, when you build a large structure, you want to put wood in the midst, in between what we call the stones. And there's no concrete at that time, and concrete was invented, I think, by the Romans. And so these are stones. And in the region where earthquakes are very prominent, the wood are helpful in preventing what we call buildings from collapsing, because the wood would kind of absorb the impact of earthquakes. So stones and between the wood between the stones. That's how the work is done. The work is being carried on with diligence and is making rapid progress in that direction. So we question the elders and ask them who authorized to rebuild this temple and finish it. We ask their names so we can write down the names of the leaders for your information. This is the answer they give them. They gave us. We are the servants of the God of heaven and earth. We are rebuilding a temple that was built many, many years ago, one that the great king of Israel built and finished. Solomon's name is not mentioned here because by that time the Persians don't even know who Solomon is, because Solomon is many, many hundred years ago, but he was a great king and of Israel, built and finished. But because our ancestors angered the God of heaven, and the God of heaven is also the name that the Persians and also worship the God of heaven. It is also the it's not a normal thing, but and for the Jews called God of heaven, but they all believe that God created heaven and earth, so it is something that they can relate. So because he angered the God of heaven, he gave them to the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, the Chaldean king of Babylon, who destroyed this temple and deported the people to Babylon. However, in the first year of King Cyrus, king of Babylon, he didn't say king of Persia. Cyrus was king of Persia, but he became the king of Babylon because he conquered Babylon in around 539. So he is also king of Babylon. And so when he became king of Babylon, he became the king of the Persian Empire, but also basically he took over the Babylonian Empire, so to speak. So King Cyrus issued a decree to rebuild this house of God. He even removed from the temple of Babylon the gold and silver articles of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple in Jerusalem, and brought them to the temple in Babylon. Then King Cyrus gave it to the man named Sheshbazzar. It seems that Sheshbazzar is probably not the same as Zerubbabel. Some will argue that, and because it was that man Sheshbazzar, or if it's Zerubbabel, which would be their and their more and Sheshbazzar would be probably a name that the Babylonians and all the Persians have on record, and because they authorized him, he may have a different name, but we don't really know. But I think more likely, Sheshbazzar is almost spoken to as in the past. So he gave it to the man named Sheshbazzar, whom appointed as governor, and told him, take these articles and go and deposit them in the temple of Jerusalem and rebuild the house of God in his sight. So Sheshbazzar came and laid the foundations of the house of God in Jerusalem. From that day to present, it has been under construction. Not completely truthful, because it was abandoned after a couple of years, and it has not been finished. But anyway, they tried to build it, and then it was stopped, and then they now trying and trying to rebuild it. So now, if you please the king, and that is not a complete lie, but it is kind of twist and bending the truth a little bit. If you please the king and made a search in the royal archives of Babylon to see if King Cyrus did in fact issue a decree to rebuild his house of God, let the king send us his decision on this matter. Okay, this is the governor saying this. Okay, now king, let us search to see if King Cyrus did in fact issue a decree. Then chapter 6, King Darius then issued an order. They searched in the archives in the treasury of Babylon. They didn't find it, and there was nothing there. But a scroll was found in the citadel of Ecbatana, which is the summer palace, I think, or winter palace, I'm not too sure now, of Cyrus in the province of Media. Media is where Cyrus is basically his home. And so then his capital is Babylon, but he would go to his retreat in Ecbatana. So they didn't find anything in Babylon, but they found in the archive. So it was a very thorough search. And Darius was not just he could have just found that search in Babylon and can say that nothing is found. All right. Again, Darius is some years later, he may not know what Cyrus' decree. And anyway, so very extensive search. So Cyrus has a palace in Ecbatana, and so they went and found it, and they found it. Now, in chapter 1, there was what we call the proclamation of decree, that is public declaration. This is more of a kind of the minutes or the memorandum that is put in the archives. And there will be some differences in that, although the text will be largely the same. So there are two different, what we call, same decree, but in different forms. One is a royal proclamation, and one is what we call the minutes, so to speak, or the actual archival material. So in the first year, King Cyrus also decreed concerning the Temple of Babylon. Let the temple be rebuilt as a place of present sacrifices, and let foundations be laid. It is about 60 cubits high and 60 cubits wide. Now, this is probably problematic because 60 cubits high, 60 cubits wide is a very square building. The temple is not. If you look at the Temple of Solomon, it's 60 cubits in length, and it is 20 cubits in width. It is 60 cubits, 30 cubits in height. And 60 cubits is really too big. And but it's a square kind of thing. Maybe it's an idealistic kind of a thing, or it was a mistake that was made. But the text actually say that it is 60 by 60. But even Solomon's temple is 60 by 20 by 30, and it is not that 60 by 60. Okay, all right. With 3 courses of large stones and 1 of timbers. Okay, and the cost is paid by the royal treasury, and maybe not all of it, and because if it was repaid by the royal treasury, they would have no difficulty actually and rebuilding that. And so also the gold and silver articles of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar took from the temple in Jerusalem and brought to Babylon, returned to the palaces in the temple in Jerusalem. They are deposited there. So now, chapter 9, governor of Trans-Euphrates, Shethar-Bozenai, and you other officials, stay away from there. Don't interfere with the work on this temple of God. Let the governor of the Jews and the elders rebuild this temple on the site. Moreover, I thereby decree what you're to do for these elders. So this goes beyond Cyrus. The expenses to be fully paid from the royal treasury, from the revenues of Trans-Euphrates, okay? So that from the taxes of the province, they are going to be used to build a temple, so that the work will not stop. Whatever is needed, young bulls, rams, male lambs, or burnt offerings to the God of heaven, wheat, salt, wine, olive oil, as requested by the priests in Jerusalem, must be given to them daily without fail, so that they may offer sacrifices pleasing to God and pray for the well-being of the king, that is himself, Darius, and his sons. Furthermore, I decree if anyone defies this edict, a beam will be pulled from the house, and they are to be impaled upon it, crucified. And for this crime, the house will be made a pile of rubble. May God, who caused his name to dwell there, overthrow any king or people who lifts a hand to change this decree or destroy this temple in Jerusalem. I, Darius, have decreed it. Let it be carried out in diligence. So you find out how God had caused Darius to go even beyond the decree of Cyrus and assisted in the rebuilding of the temple. Then, because the decree that the Darius sent to Tattenai, the governor of Euphrates, and Shethar-Bozenai, and the elders carried out great diligence. So the elders of the Jews continued to build and prosper the preaching of Haggai, the prophet, and Zechariah, the descendant of Edo. They finished rebuilding the temple according to the command of God and of the decrees of Cyrus and Darius. And they say Artaxerxes. Artaxerxes was not involved in the temple thing, but well, probably was added in because later on we'll look at the building of the walls, and Ezra-Nehemiah is one book, and maybe it is how Artaxerxes also helped and in the whole plan of God is put that, okay. And so technically Artaxerxes is not involved, but in the long run, in the provision of God, he is added there as well. The temple was completed on the 3rd day of the month of Adar, which is the 12th month, and that is in March in our calendar, and in the 6th year of the reign of King Darius. So the building was completed, the temple was completed in about 4.5 years. Okay. Then the people of Israel, the priests, the Levites, and the rest of the exiles celebrated the dedication of the house of God with joy. For this dedication, they offered 100 bulls, 200 rams, 400 male lambs, and a sin offering for Israel, 12 male goats, one for each of the tribes. A big, of course, dedication, but nothing compared to what Solomon did. Solomon, many times over in the dedication. Right? They installed the priests in their divisions and the Levites in their groups for the service of God at Jerusalem, according to what is written in the law of Moses. Note that this happened even before Ezra came, and that we'll see in chapter 6. They completed it in the 12th month in the Adar. Then in the 14th month of the 14th day of the first month, that is Nisan, that is probably somewhere in April, and in our calendar, the exiles celebrate the Passover. And the priests and purify themselves and were ceremonially clean, all ceremonially. The Levites slaughtered the Passover lamb for all the exiles, for the relatives, and for the priests, and for themselves. And so the Israelites who had returned from exile ate Passover together with all who had separated themselves from the unclean practices of the Gentile neighbors to seek the Lord. This is probably a very important verse because it corrects what we call the impression given that the leaders, Zerubbabel and others, completely and refused the help of the what we call Samaritans. They were not called Samaritans, but the people from Samaria and all that. And because they want to come and have a part in that, but they are not willing, what we call, to then follow fully the law. But for anyone, any of the Jewish people, or even anyone, and who would separate themselves for the unclean practices of the Gentile neighbors, then they would basically follow the Torah and all that. They are allowed to be part of the Jewish community. So they were not just basically what we call unfriendly, but you cannot. Just like today, the Buddhists or the Hindus, we want to come and help you build a church, and then we want to worship together. No, cannot. You cannot. Only we can build our church. We cannot help you build our church. Okay. But if they convert, if they renounce the Hinduism and the Buddhism and whatever religions they come and become Christians, of course they can join us. Of course they can worship with us. So that is the basic understanding. The God of Israel, and for 7 days celebrated with joy the feast of unleavened bread, because the Lord had filled them with joy by changing the attitude of the king of Assyria. Again, if you're curious, refer to king of Assyria. No, the king of Assyria is not. But the king of Assyria is the one who initially brought the whole exile, and it was the first empire there, and the Babylonians overthrew Assyria. Then the Persians overthrew Babylonians, and Assyria has been what we call a superpower for a very, very long time. So in one sense, he is like, okay, and you can say that even Darius is like the king of Assyria and king of Babylon and king of the Persians. So the idea of king of Assyria is not a mistake, but it is to remind that how the empire of Assyria returned, and various what we call dynasties or empires, and that is the king, the foreign king of Assyria, and changed attitude of the king of Syria. So he assisted them in the work of God, the God of Israel. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. That is an okay. All right. The study for tonight. Okay. I know I've basically talked very, very fast trying to finish this. And well, I think I did. Okay. All right. And let me